Hands up if you hate people who are always blaming others. Right? It is so annoying. But here's the thing. Before this year, I would have been like you, raising both hands with confidence. But now I know I am actually one of them, those guys who do not take responsibility for their feelings or their reactions. And more importantly, now I know I did it to myself. See, in 2003, I was 17 years old. When I decided to become a writer, I drew up a 10-year plan in which I would learn the fundamentals of writing. And one of the first things I learned about writers was that most of them kept journals. So I wanted to do the same because keeping a journal would help me build a writing habit, increase the power of my perception, strengthen my memory, improve my linguistic skills, and allow me to play with voice, style, and writing craft. And finally, it would bring to the forefront the major themes and subjects that occupy my mind. And these would become the fodder for my poetry, articles, lectures, and fiction. So, in 2003, I made journal writing a major part of my professional life. And you know what? It worked. Over the years, I improved my craft, and then I got published. What I was not aware of at the time, however, was that the well-being of my mind was slowly deteriorating. And 10 years later, in 2013, I sought professional help. Therapy forced me to confront some of the major turning points in my life. But it was only last year, when I moved into a new place and carried with me boxes upon boxes of private journals, that it hit me. I had spent 14 years actively building my own victim consciousness. And I did this in 3 main ways, which I would like to share with you today. Because rereading over 80 journals spanning 14 years, I learned when I wrote, how I wrote, and what I wrote about. So first, I discovered the when. I realized that I only wrote when I was angry, sad, confused, disappointed, hurt, etc. These feelings became familiar to me. The more I wrote from them, about them, and for them, the more I strengthened my awareness of them, the more I held on to them, the more I told my brain how important they were to my livelihood. I was on constant fight or flight mode, and I lost the ability to articulate or to address the other set of feelings that didn't antagonize my ego. Forgiveness, comfort, love, I know comebacks, I know grudges, and a belligerent heartache. I guess I didn't see the long-term side effects because the short-term gain was obvious. Survival, and I did survive. I learned how to stand up to bullies and how to shut down conflict. But in reading over my journals, I saw just how much focusing on one set of emotions robbed me of the other spectrum. There's an entry on my first slam poetry competition, which was held at the Jamaican embassy in Kuwait. I was the only Arab and only female participant, and I won first place. Where were you guys when I was writing my journal? So do you know what I write in my journal? I won first place, full stop. And then I proceed to detail in 10 pages the passive-aggressive tactics of an ex-friend of mine. Just one sentence on winning the first slam poetry competition of my life, followed by 10 pages of undiluted anger. Now I know that good things and bad things happen every day, right? I'm not a child. As Ali said, I'm just short. I'm also aware that they can happen simultaneously, and they often do. But keeping detailed journals all those years showed me how slanted perception can become, especially when one's ego is under attack. Over the years, my mind developed a bias, and it concentrated on a specific set of feelings. So it stopped showing me the world as it was. Instead, it filtered everything through my suspicion, my pain, my anger, in other words, through negative emotions. And now listen, I am not saying that I should have ignored uncomfortable or even unhealthy feelings. We all need to familiarize ourselves with the dark side of human behavior. Doing so would enable us to set boundaries and therefore to protect ourselves from harm. What I saw in my journals, however, was that I did not honestly give as much attention to both worldviews, the good and the bad. For instance, and this is common, I prioritize getting caught off in traffic over witnessing someone smile on the road while letting me pass in front of them. What my journal showed me in dates, incidents, and in verbiage is that for years I have taken the beautiful side of life for granted, and that I have trained myself to place an emphasis on negative emotions, negative perceptions, negative events, and negative people. And I didn't see anything wrong with it at the time because all the advice on writing said that conflict was the story. For 14 years though, focusing on conflict instead of human connection and compassion in general exacerbated my victim consciousness. So, my first breakthrough was recognizing that I built my helplessness with words and actions. This meant that I could use a different set of words and actions that prioritized joy, courage, compassion, and unconditional love to tilt my perception back toward a more balanced worldview. My second breakthrough was discovering the how. Now, after I made sure that I focused on pain and betrayal and sadness and confusion, it turns out I never felt accountable enough to do anything about them the first time they came up. Now, I'm not denying that I was wronged or that I felt tired or sad. What I am saying is that I took zero responsibility for my feelings after events had passed. And I wasn't the only one doing it, by the way. Everyone around me did the same thing. When I met friends at gatherings or at coffee places, they ached in the same way, year after year after year. A funny moment that drove that point across for me was when I was sitting in the living room, going through a journal from 2011. My best friend and brother were talking. Suddenly, my best friend turned to me and cried, "Oh, Nada, we have to lose weight. And this time, let's challenge one another to stick to a diet and an exercise routine. Promise me," she pleaded, "promise me we will do it together." Instead of promising her, I quoted her, word for word, from the entry in the journal I was reading where I described the same interaction, only dated 7 years ago. So guys, take a moment right now and think about a complaint or an unfulfilled desire you've had since 2011. How much effort have you really applied in doing something about it? Or are you like me and my best friend, suggesting new plans with passion, only to realize that they're not new? And they're never going anywhere without consistent actions. Remember, being a victim is feeling helpless. It's the sense that life happens to you, that you're not in charge. So, after I discovered that I focused on negative emotions much more than positive ones, I then understood that I wasn't particularly honest about wanting to change them the first time they came up. Then I stumbled upon a third discovery. I found out the what. What I wrote about, ladies and gentlemen, and oh, this is going to be so shocking, was myself. I mean, yes, I get that that is the main point of having a journal in the first place. It's for people to be introspective and to vent. And to be fair, I did a lot of great things during those 14 years, so I wasn't just lying around moping. But my journals completely revolved around me. My writing journey, my feelings, my desires, they didn't include other things like how developments in science and technology were impacting the world, or how social laws were changing through campaigns and activism, even though these are subjects I am passionate about. By writing about myself, however, and focusing specifically on my feelings, I was shrinking my universe. Just think about it. I can only write, "I need to go on a diet," for 7 years straight. If I wasn't busy thinking and writing about Malala or Elon Musk or our feminists, our charities, and our talented artists. Remember, simply by making my feelings the center of my universe and recognizing the real work of others, I would have felt motivated to be more productive and more proactive, and I would not have been satisfied with cheap complaints and flimsy wants. For instance, writing about the animal shelters and the work that their volunteers do all over Kuwait inspired me to go beyond what I thought was my limit. Now here's an example. In 2014, I bought a cat from a terrible place. I didn't know anything about animal shelters at the time or the range of abuse that takes place in stores that sell animals. A year later, I wanted a companion for that cat, so I adopted a rescue from Care Kuwait. And it was only then that I started to pay attention to the work that their volunteers do all over the country. Now, at first, I only donated to them, thinking I was doing my part to help animals in the only way that I could. But then, I began buying food and water that I would keep in my car to give to ferals and strays. And for a while, I sincerely thought this was all I could do. But it wasn't. Last year, I built a shelter in the garden to protect the neighborhood cats from winter. And again, I sincerely thought this now is my real limit. But that also wasn't. A few months ago, my brother and I noticed that one of the kittens in the garden had a skin disease. So, instead of complaining about that in my journal, where I would have blamed authorities for their lack of care and attention, yada yada yada, my brother and I followed in the footsteps of volunteers whom I had already been introducing to my mind by writing about them regularly. So, we fostered the little one until he healed from the virus and was fully vaccinated, and then we found him a forever home. Now, because my brothers and I are allergic, and my parents do not like cats roaming around our house, I never thought that fostering sick cats was something we could do as a family. The antidote to that belief wasn't any change in my external reality. It was simply reinforcing the idea that fostering animals was a beautiful thing and that it was something that was being done all over the country. And my mind got used to that. So, by focusing on a different what, the content of my journal entries, I was able to change both the when, which emotions I emphasize, as well as the how, whether I indulge in passivity or choose proactivity. And if I can leave you with anything today, I hope it's this. Our fleeting, random thoughts are neither fleeting nor random. You'd know exactly what they look like if you document them regularly. But when you do, be careful not to nurture a slanted version of reality, because that ends up controlling your vision, your habits, and your emotional reactions. At the end of the day, we are linguistic beings. We communicate and digest experiences in language. Through writing, we can even reshape our consciousness. So my journals this year focus more on gratitude and forgiveness than they do on how I have been wronged or true story. How I am right and everyone else is an idiot. I also take responsibility for my thoughts and feelings. I do so by following everything with an action plan as soon as they arise, even if that action plan is simply praying to get more clarity on what I need to do from this point onward. But sometimes I don't know how to change a feeling as soon as it emerges, and that's okay, because feelings are messy and they are necessary. However, they don't have to control me or to define my identity. And to overcome a limited way of thinking, I began writing about inspirational people, not how they relate to me, but rather how they relate to the world, to remind me that what we do does make a difference. And instead of complaining and judging, I could learn from people who are already transforming our reality one step at a time. Because look, we know that everything is relative, and whatever we do depends on our perception. We just need someone to remind us every once in a while that our perception is only an ink stain away. So pick up your pens, reclaim your thoughts, let go of your victim consciousness, and change your world. Thank you.